fishing, it's in my soul.
Welcome to the Salt Strong Podcast, disrupting fishing entertainment as you know it. Prepare to laugh. Prepare to get to know fishing legends in a whole new and unfiltered way. And on occasion, you might even learn a thing or two about fishing. Here's your host, Joe Simons. Like diamonds.
Hello, Salt Strong Nation. Joe Simons. Like diamonds, got quite the crew here, quite the cast of characters. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7 of us. This could be a record for the podcast. And we're going to talk today about fishing etiquette fails. Fails on the beach, fails on the pier, fails on the boat, fails on the kayak, fails everywhere you can imagine. What we're talking about here are just some of the stories that have happened to us. They've probably happened to you if you're listening to this. And maybe you're just a newbie and you're trying to make sure you don't become one of the fishing fail stories or the etiquette fail stories. So we're going to share a little bit of everything on the to-dos, the to-don'ts, the things to absolutely never do. And we'll even throw in a couple of wrenches at some wave runners and jet skis before this is all said and done. So first and foremost, everyone announce yourself. I know a lot of people are listening and not watching. Who do we have here starting at the top? At least to my top, I see Wyatt up there in the top. Oh, Courtney. Oh, look at the people raising their hand like this is school. Courtney, go first for raising your hand.
I am Courtney. I am the editor-in-chief with Salt Strong. Happy to be here and talk about some of the craziness I have encountered.
And for you, a lot of it's on the beach, big surf
Correct.
angler, but I know you and your husband just got a boat. I saw you guys getting out there this past weekend. So you'll have all kinds of news stories as well.
Oh, I have stories from this weekend.
Already?
Oh, yes.
Oh, that didn't take long.
No.
Wyatt, present.
Yes, hand up. I'm here. So I'm Wyatt. I'm one of the inshore fishing coaches down in Texas, but I've also done a lot of pier fishing, and I've been starting to get into some more jetty fishing here on the Port A jetty. So I'm gonna have a whole wide berth of kayak and boat and jetty and pier stories ranging from the Carolinas here to Texas, everything in between. It's going to be a fun one.
And also a new boat owner.
Mm-hmm.
Tony, present.
Yep, Tony's here. I've fished from kayak, boat, a little bit of both. So I've seen the best of both worlds. You know, kayak and boat anglers kind of have this little brawl, I guess you can say. So I have some things I'd like to share about that as well.
Where do you see jet skis in there?
Jet skis. I think kayak and boat anglers both dislike jet skiers. So I think we're on the same page there.
Who's next? Justin, present.
Present. Justin, you're resident tackle guru guy. Done a lot of pier fishing before I got into kayak fishing, from Sebastian Inlet, some jetties at passes on the West Coast. A lot of kayak stuff offshore too, which is like a pretty scary thing to do when you're in 300 feet of water in a kayak. Yeah, we'll talk about. I like the to do's and to don'ts. I like that. That's gonna stick.
And who else?
Austin,
present.
I'm one of the fishing coaches here at Salt Strong as well. If you guys have made any posts in the community, I'm probably the main guy that you're talking to. You probably get a little bit of everybody on there, but I will be commenting on your posts and reports in the community. And today I'm going to be talking about no wake zones a little bit.
Ooh, yes. And then Lukey with a slightly new haircut.
Yeah, I got it trimmed. I was starting to get a lot of comments, some positive, so probably more negative. But I gotta spruce it up a little bit, you know. I'll talk about a variety of things too, but one in particular happened last week, and that's kind of what I mentioned this to Joe, and it's like it'd be fun just to have just a discussion and tell stories. And so the worst violation it was a fishing violation, a boating violation, like anything you think of, and we're going to start jabbing sea-doos.
Already. That was quick.
Already. Yeah, right off the bat. So it was just literally last week. I was fishing in the evening. It was with me and my girlfriend was on the boat and Otis. So it was the three of us on the front of the boat fishing, like actively fishing, trolling motor down in a no motor zone, not just a no wake zone, a no motor zone, like no combustible engine zone. and fishing down this bank, and the sea-doo was coming right at us, like right down the edge of the flat, which is, again, totally, there's signs every like 50 yards, no combustion engine, no combustion engine. And he's going inside the signs and coming right at us. And so I was just like, it started a ways off, and there's no way he's going to keep going. He's going to turn off and go off the flat. He didn't turn off. And then he decided to go in between me and the shore. And it literally happened so fast. I had just casted my line out, like not even towards shore, just like a normal cast. And he ran over my line and came within 10 feet of the boat. And so I just like raised my hand, just going like, and he looked at me like he was puzzled why I was mad. And so he wasn't being purposefully, doing a bad thing, but he just had no clue and clearly wasn't reading signs. And what just shocked me is that didn't even consider that somebody fishing doesn't want to get like ridden right up on, like on a plane. And it just blew my, I've had a good amount of issues, but nothing quite that blatant where you shouldn't even, if it was in like in a canal where people are buzzing anyhow, like that, that just happens. But in a no combustion zone, running over my line, like I was blown away. Still can't believe it.
One more reason that wave runners, sea-doos, whatever you want to call them, just don't get much respect. And that's not to say there are some amazing anglers who fish out of sea-doos, people that could probably outfish everyone on this call. There's some legit anglers I've seen who are like, catching like, I'm talking offshore fish, like doing crazy stuff. But for the most part, you get people like that who have probably never even been on a boat before, never driven one, and they get on a sea-doo, whether they're from out of town, they're renting them, which happens a lot down in Florida, or if it's, they just got their stimulus check and just decided to go buy a wave runner, and they go out there and just have absolutely zero idea. And clearly they're not anglers, I would imagine. The combustion, like looking at signs, people don't read anyways in general, but like going within 10 feet of someone and you were in a small little cut, right? I have an idea of where you were.
No, I wasn't in a cut. A cut can be somewhat explained. Like this was open water. It was just a shoreline. It was an island. And so there was literally a mile of water to that direction. That's deeper water, and it's not a no combustion zone. So like, I literally didn't know where. If he would have stopped, I wouldn't even know where to start. Like I was like, and so he kept going. And his wife was coming, and she was coming down the same line. And so I was just kind of doing the, hey, like go that way. And so she did go that way, but she went 15 feet on the other side of me, but she went slow. And I could tell her, hey, like this is a no motor zone. Like you need to go outside those signs. Again, none of them, they weren't being mean. Like it wasn't a situation, because I have some mean stories too, where people were just being mean, but they just didn't know. And so they weren't being like purposely, doing something bad. They just really didn't know. And it was an example of just how some people just really just have no idea what they're doing out there. And it may be, at least whoever rented that, I assume they're probably renting those, but it'd be nice if they gave some directions on what to do and what not to do.
Little boater safety.
Yeah, something, but it was, or just read signs, right? That could have been, that direction itself would have saved that, but yeah, crazy. So I'm excited to hear some stories from everybody.
Oh yeah, we got a bunch of them. I know we've had everything from airboats. Remember that one time we're fishing out in the flats, and an airboat just goes, same deal, like right next to us. Like, what is happening here? Where did that come from? And if you talk about loud, it can't get any louder when an airboat goes 20, 30 feet from you. It's like, all right, spot's dead. Who's next? Who's got a good story?
I'll go ahead and switch it up. So we're on the water in the boat. Now we're on the rocks. We're on the jetty. This one happened probably 3 weeks ago. There were some reds that were schooled up on the end of the jetty here in Port Aransas. And I took out some of those 3-ounce spoons and wanted to try and get on some of those fish. And, you're seeing the school running around the point, and there's a couple other anglers out there. This is something that I see happen almost every time that there's a hot bite on a jetty or a pier, when there's an inexperienced angler that's out there and is just really excited. And you almost can't blame them, because it's just something that you wouldn't know if you haven't been there and been in a hot bite like that. But, you're seeing these reds porpoising like there's a school, like 50 of them, and they're all upper slot, and they're slamming bait on the top of the shore. I pitched a spoon in front of the school, hooked up with a red, and it starts running. But, I led the school, and there were a couple out front, so there's still some behind it. The angler that was over to my right makes a cast over my line while I'm fighting a fish. Now, granted, 10 minutes ago, we were casting over each other's lines just because it's pack space. And, the person that casts first, your line's going to be lower in the water. It's okay to cast on top if you know that your retrieve is going to get there after that person has already pulled in their line, because there's just not a lot of space and you have to manage your lines properly. But when you're fighting a fish, that line's going to stay out there and you don't know where that fish is going to run. If you're on a locked position like a pier or a jetty, you need to pull in your lines while that person's fighting that fish. There may be other fish around, but you need to, let that person fight that fish because that fish is going to move and move and move. His spoon gets wrapped in my line and I cannot effectively fight this fish. I can't put the tension on it because that spoon's going to hit the tip of my rod. I had to let some line out, and he finally gets the spoon untangled and he's sitting there holding his rod like I'm supposed to move my line under his spoon and get out from under him. Like I'm the one that's in the wrong here. So I end up losing the fish because I'm not putting proper tension on it and it unbuttons. And it's just, I've seen it happen so many times on piers with king mackerel. Someone will hook up on a king and there might be some Spanish popping around, and some inexperienced guy is going to throw a gotcha while they're fighting a king on that same side of the pier. You go to the other side of the pier and start fishing. Yes, the bite may be hot over there, but get away from the guy who's hooked up, because almost every time I see a line get wrapped up during a fight, it never ends well. Big spoons, big gotcha plugs, especially with trebles, braided line, nightmare, and you're not going to be able to reel that fish in. So that's probably one of the biggest etiquette mistakes I see when you're fishing landlocked positions is not respecting the person who's hooked up and not managing your lines properly when they are. So that's something to keep in mind, and a lot of times when someone's fighting a big fish, and the bite's hot on one side, most people just sit, respectable anglers, I would say, will pull their lines up, sit there and watch that fight and wait. Once that fish is, in, then people continue fishing. But I've seen, a dozen hardcore anglers all pull up and wait for a fight to finish. It's the respectable thing to do when there's a big fish on the line. You let somebody else have that fight. It's their moment. It's their day. There will always be other fish, but you don't want to ruin it for somebody else.
Same goes for a boat or anywhere, right? I mean, if you've ever been like offshore fishing, like for big game fish like marlin and sailfish, that's what you do. Like you might have 6 lines trolling. The second you get a marlin on, I mean, all lines come in, right? It's now about that one fish to get that bad boy in. So it's good tip. Austin, you've got a pretty wild story, I know, on the no wake zone area.
Oh yeah, man. So I don't want to come off the wrong way. I know that, no wake zones get talked about a lot. And I'm not going to be the guy to say that they're not important, or they are, because there are some out there that are way too long and like 50 foot of water here in Jacksonville. And man, it's hard to go slow through them. I will say that. But it also is important to either go slow or go fast, because when you go in that in-between zone, you're just putting off the biggest wake you can. It's a no wake zone. So at least try to put off the lowest amount of wake that you can. And so I was younger. I want to say, I could be way off, but I'm going to say I was 17. And I'm out in the boat by myself. And when I went out by myself, my dad always liked me to be somewhere safe, so those no wake zones are typically the types of areas that I would kind of hang out in and I would fish. Well, one day, and for my Jacksonville locals, I'm talking about where Atlantic Boulevard goes over top of the Intercoastal, and there's a little sandbar down there right next to an island. And so I'm fishing on top of the sandbar, casting out off of the sandbar, fishing the drop-offs. And a big 3-story yacht starts to come through this area, and he's just got his bow up. It's just plowing, and I'm waving my hands at him saying, "Hey, man, please slow down because this isn't going to end well." And sure enough, he didn't see me. He's all the way up on the 3rd story of this yacht, and he had no clue. He wasn't even paying attention.
No, he had champagne going on. He didn't care about you. Nose in the air.
Oh. And so sure enough, these waves come, and I seen them coming. Luckily, kind of got prepared for it. I mean, I guess mentally, and they come crashing into the boat. Luckily, I was on top of that sandbar, and my boat hit the bottom. It didn't sink. It was shallow enough water that my boat literally just went down a foot or so, and I still had enough sidewall to keep the edges of my boat out of the water. I could kick on the bilge pump and get everything out. But man, it was scary. Even though I was on top of that sandbar, I didn't know what was going to happen. I just knew that a lot of water was coming in my boat, and I had never dealt with that before. So no wake zones. Just put off the minimum wake that you can put out in a no wake zone. You never know. You never know what might be happening, who might be fishing there to get away from big waves and stuff like that. So,
yeah, and legally too, we were chatting about this earlier, but legally, if you are one of those people putting out the wake and your wake causes damage, like you're liable for that damage too. So it's not only just a consideration thing, but it's a potential financial implication thing too.
And it's not really fightable. Like your insurance would have to pay, if your boat had sunk and you had captured that boat on film or whatever, they would have been 100% liable. Because we had that happen with our camera, and we saved the footage, and you can see the boat, and you can see. I mean, they did the same thing. They came in, they should have slowed down, they didn't. Slowed at the very end. By that time, it was too late. The camera tips overboard and just put out a massive, massive wake. And we didn't do it because we're nice guys, and it was very irritating and tempting, but we could have gone after them. They would have had to pay for the camera. I know down on the Keys, like that, what's that one little cut there, Luke, at Islamorada? I mean, the signs even say it, that you're responsible for your own wake. Any damage caused, it's up to you, because it's a pretty narrow area with some boats in there fishing. And the signs, big and bold, make everyone very well aware that you are responsible for your own wake. So good reminder there. Who's next? Yeah, go for it.
I was going to say, even if it's not a no wake zone, just be aware of, what's around you, who's around you, especially if you're in an area where, it's not a no wake zone, but you see a group of kayakers, going by, slow down for them because they can get swamped very easily. And on the other end, if you are a kayaker or a paddleboarder, try not to be in those channels. Don't be in those busy areas. That's why you're in a kayak or a paddleboard. You can paddle in 6 inches of water. You don't have to be in the channel. So just be aware of that as well.
Yeah, because for kayakers, it makes it uncomfortable for a boater if you are going through, some channel. If one guy is nice enough to slow down, then all of a sudden you got 3 or 4 boats, especially on a busy holiday weekend, and like some of them aren't paying attention. It can almost like cause a lot of damage. So I think it's great advice. I've seen it happen there in the right before the Gasparilla Marina, right before the idle zone. I mean, you get some of those kayakers that want to cross right there to go back in some of those mangrove paths, and it can be pretty gnarly. Great tip. Who's next? Who's got another good one? Courtney. Oh, Justin. Oh, present.
So Tony, thank you for bringing up the whole, being in a kayak, not being in the middle of a channel thing. I was going to make note of that. Like for Port Canaveral, if we're heading out and we're going to try to go out to the buoys, don't be out in the middle when everyone's trying to get up and run, 30, 40 miles an hour. It's pretty dicey when we have the sides we can paddle on. I actually have 2. I have one where I feel like I was kind of bombarded by a bunch of people when I was hooked up, and one where I feel like I was in the wrong, and I'd like to share that one.
This is going to be good.
Yeah. So first one, in the fall months, anybody in the Tampa Bay area knows that there are big schools of redfish that congregate at certain areas. Weeden Island is an example. And during the fall months, there are a ton of guides out there that are using live bait and fishing up on top of these schools of redfish. And in those moments, it's become very customary to get a lot of white bait or a lot of bait and just wiffle ball and chum up these schools of fish. And that tends to be the common practice for a lot of people in Tampa Bay, or guides in particular. In a kayak, I remember I was pre-fishing for a tournament, for an IFA tournament, and I finally found the school of fish that had not yet been found by the other 20 boats that were kind of hanging around the general haunts of where the school normally pops up that time of the year. I found the school, they were happy. They hadn't seen another bait or another angler yet, and I was able to hook one on artificial, which was rare because a lot of times these fish get laser focused on live bait. And as soon as I hooked up, it was one boat on top of the other. I mean, it was like 10 feet to my right, 10 feet to my left, 10 feet behind me, and everybody's casting out floats and baits and chumming up white bait. And it seemed to be this unspoken approval amongst all the other boats around each other that was the way that you fish for these fish. It was like, oh yeah, you didn't get the memo? Like, that's how we do things here. And it doesn't have to be that way. What we teach is positioning and angling and trying to make sure that you're presenting your bait in a manner that's appropriate for leading fish. And a lot of times these fish get so fed up, in a frenzy of live bait being chummed up, that the fish just kind of circle up and they go to the left and the right and they scatter, and they just get so fired up that all these boats create this semicircle around them in the shoreline, and they just all bombard baits and sit there and wait and say, oh, it's just a matter of time until I get bit. And, I feel like the right thing to do would be to just kind of give a little bit of space to somebody, let them fight their fish, wait for the school to settle down, and then find a way to lead the school and get a bait in front of them. But, it's just gotten to a point where there's, 20, 30 boats out there that time of the year, and everybody's on top of each other. And, an appropriate way to handle it would be to kind of create a line, right? One person hooks up, and then the school moves off, settles down again, and then another boat tries to reposition. And it's almost like a lined fashion. Wyatt, you kind of talked about it, fishing jetties. The same is true with Sebastian Inlet. One person hooks up, the current's going one way. You kind of work in a lined fashion. You don't want to cross each other's lines. That's a recipe for disaster. So that's, don't really know how that can be fixed. That might just be a bigger systemic thing just for the way people fish in that area. But I've never seen that anywhere else in the state of Florida. It's wild. And one part for me, I'm going to take full responsibility for this one. I was 19 or 20, and I was so overzealous to get snook on the beach down in Sanibel. I would spend a week with my parents at a condo in Sanibel in the summertime, June and July, and I'm sight fishing for snook on the beach. In the middle of summer, there's no wind. The beaches are crystal clear. And you can see these 28 and 30-inch snook swimming in between ladies that are just chilling in their beach chair, just laying out, catching the sun. And I'm watching the snook swim underneath them. And I'm 19. I didn't care. I would flip a spoon up in front of them, and I'd hook the snook underneath the lady in the chair. She'd fall out of her chair and freak out. And there's kids all over the beach. There's people throwing footballs, and people got mad at me. And they were just like, you shouldn't be fishing here. We're all swimming and enjoying it. And I was like, the snook were here first. It's not their fault, and I remember thinking about that and being like, man, looking back on that now, there are sections of a beach. Sanibel's a very busy touristy area. And throughout all of summer, the beaches are going to get really busy. There's going to be a lot of people on the beach. And I can still have opportunities to fish for these snook when there aren't that many people out there. I didn't need to go and sight fish a 30-inch fish at 1 p.m. underneath a lady trying to catch some sun rays. That was not the best etiquette on my part. And realized later on, I have way better of a chance of getting a good fish early morning and late evening bites on the beach. So just because you see fish, it doesn't give you the right to cast at them, even if you do hook up.
Be honest, that happened last summer, didn't it?
Yeah, maybe. I can't get enough. I do it every year.
Courtney, what about you? I'm dying to hear what happened this past weekend, and also, kind of some beach etiquette rules as well, because in the beach, I know where you're out there, Pompano, you don't just have one rod in your hand. A lot of times you're putting up a whole spread. So give us some fails, if you will.
Oh, there are so many. And honestly, the beach brings a whole new level of disrespect for fishermen. I will tell you, it's crazy. Kind of going back to what Justin said with, the snook was here first. Well, if there are people swimming, if there's clearly already surfers on a good line of waves, if there are 5 fishermen set up, go somewhere else. So, I always try to walk as far away from the activity. I also think that produces the best fishing. When you have surfers and swimmers and sunscreen and whatever else, muddying up the waters, and it just walk away, get some distance, get some coastal distancing, as I like to call it. Thank you. But yeah,
trademark it.
Done. It's one of those things where it can be very productive to be away from people. But fishermen definitely attract other fishermen, and you will see 5 rods spread, and it will always happen. If you are at least close to an access, somebody will set up in your line as if you are BFFs and now fishing buddies forever right there. And, if they don't know how to cast, if the current's ripping and they're not using Sputnik sinkers, it is a disaster. And you've got lines everywhere and trying to fight a fish. I had probably one of my biggest redfish in the surf hit 10 feet in front of me. And I had a guy to my left that was still just casting spoons into the surf. And I'm trying to fight this redfish. I'm running up and down the beach. I mean, when you're on the beach, the boat doesn't take you to the fish. You have to run up and down the beach and work for it. So it's one of those things. It's same thing. If you got a fish on, give some respect to that person and show some coastal distancing respect, I would say.
Yeah.
But this past weekend was quite interesting. New boat owner. So we haven't taken it out as much as I would like, but we did take it out this weekend. I entered into that Fish for Hope tournament and ended up not fishing for any of the species that were in the tournament because I was super jazzed about trying out pompano jigging for the first time. Big success. I was very, very happy with it. And we were coming back and we had to go under a couple of the bridges, and Austin knows this too. There are certain sections of bridges, like there are everywhere, that you shouldn't be fishing. It says no fishing. It's the channel span. And we were going under it, and this lady chunks a weight, right in front of where we were going. And we were like real. I mean, because we were moving. And it was kind of scary, and as a new boat owner too, it was scary to see that. And, running over a fishing line in a boat, woo, I did not want that to happen. But yes, that was a really interesting, situation that happened over the weekend after the pompano win. That was kind of a little bit of a fail. It was a tough time, but then we go back to the dock, because it was just an awesome day. So we had great fish in the cooler, and we get back to the dock and there's people fishing on the dock where it says no fishing. And again, this guy throws his line out right in front. I'm trying to dock the boat, and he's got lines out off the dock. I'm like, what? This is not going to work. So I had to, make a U-turn. He ended up reeling in his lines. It was a whole thing. I'm like, I survived. And I successfusly got the boat onto the trailer for my first time.
Heck yeah.
I was pretty excited about that.
Braid in the prop,
it was,
huh?
Yeah. It was a kind of a scary weekend. It's stressful when you're a new boater, and when you don't have the respect of, other fishermen or other boaters, it makes it that much more stressful. So.
Good stuff. Tony?
Yeah, I was going to say boat ramps can be a whole call itself. My biggest issues at the boat ramps are when people are loading and unloading, whether it be a boat, whether it be a kayak, paddleboard, whatever it may be. Have your stuff ready before you back down to the ramp. Park in a parking spot, get everything set up. When you're ready to launch, then go and launch your vessel. I mean, even my fellow kayak anglers, when you're loading up your kayak, load it all up at your truck, at your car, or park somewhere close to the ramp. Do yourself a favor, get a cart. That way you can just cart it down. And if at all possible, don't use the ramp itself. You can launch a kayak anywhere. You can launch it on the side of the boat ramp where the grass is at, or you can, drag it down the end of the dock and slide it into the water. The boat ramps, they're going to get very busy, especially on the weekends in the summertime when a lot of people start getting out there. Use those areas off to the side if you're launching a kayak. I personally, my kayak, I keep it in the back of my truck. I can load everything on there. I could back up, slide it out into the water, and launch it much faster than a lot of people have launched their boats. If you can do that, that's cool. But if it takes you time to load and unload, do it all away from the ramp, and then do what you got to do to get it down to the ramp.
Yeah, we did a video on that, and the term, it's really just about, and really pretty much all of this comes down to just do what unto others what you want them to do to you. And so on the boat ramp is a very contentious place. Like that video it was like 500,000 views, and it was just covering the basics, right? But the core thing is that business zone, right? That right in front of the ramp is the business zone. That's not where your tying any ropes or anything. You're in and out of there as fast as possible. That's the business zone. Do all the other stuff off to the side. That's probably the most contentious thing in fishing / boating is the ramp experience.
Yeah. So a couple more things. I guess my biggest pet peeve is going to be the whole whoever's there first gets it first. If a boat is in a spot that it just took me an hour to try to get to, I'm going to respect that they're there and I'm going to go find somewhere else to fish. And same thing, like if you're in a boat, if you see someone in there on a kayak, don't think the bigger guy wins. It could have, there aren't boat ramps, there aren't kayak launches everywhere. It could have taken them an hour and a half to get there to finally fish. They're there fishing, let them be. There have been multiple times where I've seen someone at a spot and I'll go somewhere else and then I'll go back after those people have left and fish that spot and still catch plenty of fish. Not everybody's going to catch all those fish. So don't be afraid to leave a spot to go fish somewhere else and then come back later. And then going back to pier fishing and, I'm mainly fishing piers at night, Sebastian, Justin, you fish over there. I think my biggest pet peeve over there are the headlamps. When I get out there, I turn my headlamp off. You'll be amazed at how much you can see when you let your eyes adjust to the nighttime. When you have a headlamp shine in your face after it's been completely dark, it almost blinds you for like 2 or 3 minutes. Also, it spooks the fish. You'll have people out there with these huge halogen headlamps, LED headlamps, whatever it may be. They could light up the entire inlet and, it flashes on the water and it spooks those fish. So try to avoid doing that as well.
Yeah, they're looking for the snook.
No.
Headlamp etiquette.
Yes.
Headlamp Harry.
Headlamp Harry. Q beam on top of your hat. I kind of like to get some rules in place. At first, I was thinking just a bunch of fail stories, but I think people love rules, right? Like, Tony, what was your quote about hearing them? What was the quote earlier?
As far as proximity to the next person?
Yeah, if you can hear their conversations, you're too close, something to that effect.
Yeah, if you can hear what the other person's saying, you're probably too close to them.
It's a pretty good rule of thumb, by the way. But I think part of the issue, Justin, you gave a story there in Weeden Island. If it was your first time fishing or even fishing in Florida, maybe you hired a guide, chartered a guide for the day, and that was what you saw. You just might assume that's just normal everywhere in Florida. Same with Boca Grande. There's areas, and like here's a good tip. In Boca Grande is where right now starting to heat up for tarpon, and everyone's drifting, right? And if you notice, they are pretty packed in there. Like you could hear conversations going on next door, but they're all drifting together. No one's doing it on their own. Everyone's going down one big drift. You don't ever throw an anchor down when you see their boats drifting, et cetera. But to that point, if that was your only experience, like if you're down there in Boca Grande or somewhere in Port Charlotte and you hired a guide for the day, and it was your first time in Florida and you just saw, man, everyone just fishes this way. We're all on top of each other. That's not really true. There's certain cases where it's true certain times of year, but very, 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 very few times is that acceptable. So I'd love to just kind of go down the list, starting with the beach. What should be the rule? Is there a certain amount of feet? Tony's rule is probably pretty applicable, but what do you say, Courtney? If you go down to the beach, is it 100 feet, 50 feet? Like where if you and that area is good because of your skills and obviously you're an insider, remember, and you know the trends. But how far away do you get where you feel like, I'm not really encroaching on their space?
Yeah, definitely the conversation rule. If I can hear you talking, you can hear my conversation, definitely too close. But I would say a good rule of thumb would be like a 50-foot range. It's tough when the current moves sometimes ripping in specific places on the beaches here in Jacksonville, and it's brutal. And if you are too close, your lines will get crossed. So I would say 50 feet is probably a good rule of thumb, just to kind of keep that distance between your lines that are out, especially, for people that are setting up the big spreads.
All right, we're putting it down. If this is official, it's going to go into a checklist on our blog page, 50 feet. If we see, or if you see anyone within 50 feet, you have our authority to do whatever it takes to get them 50 feet away. I'm just kidding. Don't do that. Just play within the rules, but you can do it. What about a pier? Jetty, Wyatt, what do you think? That's a little bit different, right? Because there's only so many areas you can fish, but you also don't want to be, I mean, it's dangerous to be whipping 3-ounce spoons a foot away from someone if someone's a bad caster. So what, you get there, it's a packed day, it's a weekend. What's the etiquette?
So big thing is, I think the catchphrase will be stay in your lane. I call them shooting lanes. And you've got basically this like 5-6 foot lane where you need to be able, I mean, if you're going to a pier or a jetty, you better be a good caster. That's not a place to go if you're an inexperienced fisherman, because you need to stay in your shooting lane. You need to keep your line in that lane. That includes factoring the wind into your cast, the current, where your line is going to end up at the end of your retrieve, how fast that retrieve is going to go. These are all things that you need to practice before you get to the pier. Go to a dock that doesn't have a lot of anglers fishing it just to practice. There may be fish there, there may be not, practice if you're going to go to a busy pier, because bites can get really hot there, and you need to know what you're doing so that you don't mess up everything else going on around you. I would say all the piers and jetties I've been to, I've been able to fish shoulder to shoulder with people. But biggest thing is, before you go stand next to somebody, just ask them, am I good to cast next to you? And you better be able to cast good, because if you start messing up, then you're going to get an earful. But stay in your lane. Don't cast into somebody else's lane. Make sure that lane is you're available to stand there and cast next to them. But I've not been at a pier where, it's clearly the space is limited. And if you can stand in a spot, I would say most pier anglers, most jetty anglers will allow you to stand there next to them and fish if you can cast within your lane. So big thing, stay in your lane.
But you're still talking at least a few feet, right? You're not literally shoulder to shoulder.
I'd say there's probably a foot of distance.
Wow.
And I would say, there have been times where I'm literally rubbing shoulders with people. You get out on Johnny Mercer's Pier in North Carolina. I mean, that end of the pier, a lot of times you're waiting in line to get a spot there, and it's someone that hooks up or is leaving for the day, and you better hop in that spot. You are fishing shoulder to shoulder, not necessarily in line with some COVID regulations, but just ask is the big thing, because a lot of times those piers are packed because the bite's hot. It's Spanish mackerel every cast. I just did that report. You can catch 60 of them back to back to back to back. It's crazy, and that pier is going to be packed. So yes, you will be fishing a lot of times. This is why I say stay in your shooting lane and know how to cast. Do not go there if you don't know how to cast. You really, really, really need to practice. It's taken a lot of time before I was really comfortable to go out there. It just took a lot of practicing, because you will sometimes really be rubbing shoulder to shoulder. Most days, if there is space, you're going to give people that space. You're all going to spread out as best as you can. But I would say on average, sometimes you got a foot or less between most people. And on days when the bite's hot, the tides are right, you're going to be there rubbing shoulders with people.
I guess a good trick would be to eat a lot of beans the night before to scare away some of the people around you.
Wyatt, I wanted to add on to that, man, because I guess a good way to view like piers and jetties is that it's like a war zone. Everybody's really, if you want to go and be successful consistently at a landlocked area like a pier, a pass, or a jetty, there are zones and there are pockets of, the more consistently you go, the more you're going to find out this is the little area that everybody seems to gather, and this is the little area that everybody seems to get fish. And it can be tough to get space. I mean, we bring up Sebastian a lot, and we do a lot because it is one of the most narrow inlets in the state of Florida, especially on the East Coast. There's a lot of current. It's not that big of an area, and people are shoulder to shoulder. And I think another way to, talk about piers and jetties anywhere, doesn't matter whether it's Sebastian or anywhere you go, is to take some time, and before you even start fishing, watch and see what everybody else is doing. Because fishing at Boca Grande, you mentioned it, Joe, everybody's drifting. People that go to Boca Grande for the first time, they've never been, and they've never talked to a buddy on how to fish it. They may go and anchor, and all the locals and the entire community of people that are fishing Boca that have this understanding through osmosis of how you fish might not realize that that's what you need to do. So I recommend to anybody out there, before you go fish an area with a lot of other people around you, look and see what everybody else is doing and analyze it. How close is everybody together? Where are they casting? Are the lines on top of each other? Are they drifting? And then there's this conveyor belt where you cast and follow it down and then bring your bait back in, and you continue with this conveyor belt, kind of like Boca Grande. If you're on a beach, Courtney, and you're watching other people surf fishing, get an idea of how far away everybody else is on the beach. If you're the first person there, pick wherever you want and just go for it. But oftentimes you're going to be fishing next to other people if you're landlocked. And, Wyatt put it as ask the other person. For sure, there's nothing wrong in asking anybody. I want to make sure I'm not in your way. I still want to catch fish, but I don't want to, rob Peter to pay Paul, so to speak. And I think that, having some humility and all that, if you're just getting started and you just want to learn it, talk to people on the pier or wherever you're fishing, talk to us, ask us specifically where, talk to a local bait shop that's been there, 20, 30 years, and ask, what do I need to do to be prepared for the area that I'm going to go fish? Anglers want to help other anglers. We don't all want everybody to not catch fish. We want everybody to catch fish. We just don't want it to be at the expense of us out there. So ask around.
Yeah, communication goes a long way, especially when it comes to respect. When you're on the water, when you're on a pier, if you're fishing the surf. That's why, I call it ask before you cast. Just talk to somebody. I had somebody come up to me at Sebastian one day. I was there, this little stretch I pretty much had by myself, which was rare. And a guy came up to me. He was like, "Hey, are you jigging or are you using live bait?" And just that little conversation right there, we never crossed lines. We were comfortable fishing next to each other, and we did great. Same thing when you're on your boat or a kayak. If you're on a school of fish or you see somebody on a school of fish, ask that person, be like, "Hey, do you mind if we come over?" Most oftentimes they're more than happy to let you come over and fish the school with them. Same thing, if you're fishing at school, call somebody over, make friends with people. That's just going to make it a more enjoyable day on the water. It's better to do that than to be stressed out all day.
Yep. And if you do get way too stressed, we are going to be looking into selling, assuming that our merchant account will take it, is hand grenades and Sea-Doo torpedoes. Hand grenades for very close encounters like Luke had, and the Sea-Doo torpedoes for very tactical underwater torpedo blasts.
Long range issues.
Yeah, very long range issue.
It's going to have a homing feature on it.
Well, of course, yes. Austin, let's go to bridges. Let's have it put a rule in place for bridges. You did a great video a while back catching sheep's head on bridge pilings. Let's just say you're underneath the bridge. There's, 16, 20 bridge pilings. Is it cool to go if you're right there, like literally fishing one? Is it cool to go up right next to you and say, "Hey, I like your piling," and fish it? Or what's the...
Man, I've actually had that happen before.
Oh,
but yes and no. Like when you're sheep's head fishing, typically you're staying in one spot. You're chumming it up, or you found the fish and you're fishing there. And like there's a place, Courtney's probably familiar with it, called Nassau Sound here in like Amelia Island, Florida. And the bridge is right there at the Sound. You'll get boats loaded down on that bridge. And it's I guess you could kind of compare it to pier fishing, because there's a ton of people out there and there's just not a lot of space. So I'd say it's very situational on how many people are actually there. If there's not a lot of people there, then no, don't pull up right next to me. I don't want to talk to you. And, I'm here fishing. I'm down, you know what I mean? But if there's a bunch of people, I get it. Everybody wants to go catch fish. So it just depends on how many people there are.
Kind of like a urinal at a baseball game. You might have 30 urinal. If there's just one other person there, you don't go right next to the guy. It's just not cool.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm going to put a rule in place that you need to stick to your own bridge piling. Like, it would freak me out if look right, if we're sitting there on a piling and someone just comes right up next to us, their trolling motor, and like that just seems crazy. I don't even think that's situational. Let's go to just flats in general. Luke or Tony, what do you think? Regardless if you're in a kayak or a boat, what's too close? Like if you see someone fishing a certain flat, can you go up 50 feet ahead of them, 100 feet ahead of them? I mean, you're clearly cutting them off if they're heading a certain way. But at some point, it's okay to do that. What does that distance look like on a flat or a mangrove line?
For me, I don't think there is a distance if you're going to cut me off, because if I'm working a shoreline, I'm pretty much working that shoreline until I get tired. I've
What
gone
if the shoreline's 5 miles?
I've gone 5 miles before.
Don't cut Tony off. He is
Don't
coming
cut me
after
off.
you. We got Sea-Doo torpedoes coming. We got them for boats as well.
You play Frogger when they do? Like if they cut you off, you just go around them and cut them all back?
Yep. If you cut me off, I'm going to cut you off.
Yeah. But I'd say in general, it depends too, because the artificial fishing with using lures is very different than live bait. Like live bait is anchored down and kind of the area to be respected isn't quite as much, if you will. Whereas with lures, again, working the bank, the area to be respected is just one direction, right? You can always go back behind, but it's just to be respectful, right? Pretty much the consistent thing across all of this is if you're respectful to others, then you won't have any issues out there. And like I had an issue on this exact topic. I was fishing this bank, and it was a very, very big flat. This is up in the upper Tampa Bay, long idle zone. And so there's this one spot that has some oysters, and there's not many oysters there. And so a few people know about it. So I nobody was on that bank, right? So I was like, let me just get upwind and I'll work with the wind, and then I'll hopefully figure out what depth they are, and then I'll get the oysters. And so I look out on the other side of this flat. There's this boat going a very, very fast idle. Like there's normal idle and then like bow up idle. He knew where I was going, right? He knew about that oyster, and he wanted to get there first. Like he clearly knew my intent to fish that way. I was there first. And I literally got to the point where we got there at the same time. And we were probably 3 years into Salt Strong, so I always have to be extra nice. And so I was chatting like, hey, just know I was going up this way. I was planning on fishing this spot. It's a cool spot. And he's like, yeah, you're not anchored, so it doesn't matter. And so like, I don't think that's a rule. Like his thought was, I'm not anchored down, so I can't claim anything. And again, if he just got there and was being nice, it would have been, oh, cool. Like, I'll go around it. I'll maybe make a couple casts, and now you can anchor. And he was using cut bait. So it just comes down to intent. When people know they're being bad because they're going a little bit faster than they normally would, being a little bit sly about it. And in the day, right, just be respectful and things will go good. So as far as if you're just casting on the flat, like if you can cast to the other person, you're way too close. If I would say at least 2 cast distance, I would say at a minimum to always be from somebody else on a flat, because the flat's different than a pier or bridge. Shallow water, these fish are very spooky. And so if you get close, you're just going to ruin it for everybody, for yourself and others, if you get too many people in one spot. So I think if there is a rule, it's the 2 casts, but the overall rule is just be respectful. For like a live bait, like I was fishing pretty quick. So he could have just as easily, I would have probably plucked off a fish or 2, and then he could have sat there and got all the rest. Had he just been a little bit, just gone a normal idle speed, and we would never collided at all. So that's just very frustrating. I mean, that's happened multiple times. Yeah, that's pretty common. And you can see when they know what they're doing, because they're going at abnormally fast. You see the people with the trolling motor, they'll start going, fast as they possibly can. Yeah, Joe, we saw when we were out there filming the other day.
Oh yeah.
So it happens a lot. It's frustrating, and in many cases, I mean, there's a lot more fish out there than people think. And so in many cases, just go find a similar 2 spot somewhere else. And you'll probably catch a lot more fish, because now nobody's been busting up that spot.
Yep. And Tony touched on earlier, just because you're in a boat doesn't mean that you trump someone in a kayak or wade fishing for that matter. I mean, or on a dock, right? When we fish docks, which we do a lot, if we see someone up there fishing or even just having coffee, it's their house, it's their dock, like skip it, like go around it with your troll motor. Like don't fish it if they're literally right there. It's to me, I see people do it. I'm like, man, and they have, especially like you see young kids out there fishing, and someone just because they're in a boat thinks, oh, I kind of own this. I had that one guy, I'm fishing from a bank here in Winter Haven, bass fishing, which I do on the weekdays. And I mean, they're coming, and I see them, they're way down there, and they see me, I'm fishing on the bank. You can't miss me. I'm right there. And I thought for sure they would just kind of go around. They went right by me. I'm like, how does my lure look? Like, it was crazy. I'm talking like within feet. It was the craziest thing. And I just sat there and like looked at them, and they were just like, well, we're in a boat. You're not. I was just like, that's absolutely nuts. And I know that happens all the time because it's that mentality is I'm in a boat and this person's in a kayak or they're wade fishing. They're, not as important, or I don't know what the mentality is, but to your point, Luke, just be nice.
Yeah. And I would say if there is a tie, because there are going to be situations where like two people are fishing down a bank and they're going to meet somewhere, right? Like it's inevitable. And there's going to be situations where you can't really tell who was there first. And I almost say that the tie should go to, like, if it's, wade fishing, kayak, boat, the tie should benefit the wade fisherman, right, ahead of the kayaker, ahead of the boat, because the access, right? That wader, he could have hiked 5 miles to get that one spot, and now you stole from him. Now you've totally wrecked his day. It took him forever to get there. And if you're in the boat, you could just quickly just go on to the next similar to spot a couple miles away. And same for kayakers, right? Because I've done a lot of paddleboard fishing and kayak fishing. It's super frustrating when you go, there's like one special spot and you're sitting there huffing and puffing 3 miles. All of a sudden this boat is, again, I'm sure we've all had it. This boat is cruising faster than normal in the no wake zone, and they're really trying to beat you to it. That's I think the respectful thing to do is just to let the kayaker have it, knowing that they're going to be super quiet. They're less likely to spook the fish, and you can actually work behind them and probably catch a ton of fish as well.
Yeah, I agree with that. I've had times I've tried to sabiki a bait next to piers, and the guys on the pier are like, "What are you doing? I've got a bait right out here," and I'm trying to sabiki because there's a school of threadfin or goggle eyes down in Southeast Florida or something, and I realize I need to go figure out a better way to do this. It isn't right to be able to get up in somebody when they're land-based, and I have the ability to be anywhere, and I choose to be right where they are land-based just because that's where the bait or the fish or whatever it is. It's not right. There's more options out there. You shouldn't pigeonhole yourself like that.
Sounds like Justin's a multiple offender here on this podcast.
I've got a long track record.
Well, guys, hopefully you found this one helpful. I know we probably have a whole lot more stories. We would probably do a separate one just on the boat ramp etiquette. I know we've done the video, which we'll put a link to in the show notes. But we'd love to hear from you. We'd love to hear your best stories, as crazy as they might be. We'd love to hear any stories, not to laugh and or poke fun, but it's just a learning experience because we've all been on both sides. It's part of learning how to be a better angler, to be a more respectful angler. And I think these stories can help everyone. Maybe not some of the people on Sea-Doos who are from out of town, but for that we've got Sea-Doo rockets and underwater torpedoes. And then finally, make sure to come join us in the Insider Club. We're having fun like this all the time. We've got some new coaches, some new faces. We're just constantly expanding everything from all of the premium content, which is, on the water fishing tips. We're doing the spot dissections. Of course, we go out there and do insider reports where we go fish new spots every single week, have all kinds of new comparisons. What do you call them, Luke? Contests, where we're putting products up side by side and or doing casting contests and not contests, et cetera. Then, of course, our community. That has been really, really cool. We're well over 22,000 members there in the community. That's what Austin runs. And it is so cool to see how many people are coming in there every day and putting new stuff up. What would you say, Austin? How often are new reports going up? It seems like it's every few minutes now.
A lot. Like I can finish with one post and there's another one popping up. So it's definitely the place to be if you want to learn some stuff about fishing.
Yeah. And it's not just people just putting up a fish pic. They're actually helping. They're teaching. Anglers helping anglers is really the mantra inside of there. So they're showing, what type of spot they were fishing. We don't ask people to give GPS spots because that's not really that important. It's more about trends. But we do ask them to give, tips on what they were using, whether it was live bait or lures, any retrieval tips and, depth, what tide they were fishing or the water clarity. I mean, all that stuff they're putting in their fishing reports. And now we have it broken down by region. And Nick, our web developer, just created a directory. I think that's awesome because we've had a lot of people say, hey, I'm here in Charleston, South Carolina, or I'm in, Fort Myers, Florida, or I'm in, Corpus Christi, Texas, and I want to meet up with some other members. And now we have a directory where you can start connecting with people. And we just want to incentivize more and more meetups. And especially now that a lot of people have had their COVID shots and or just over it, we want to incentivize more and more people getting out together. We have a big coming up, real soon here. We've got a big cookout that we're going to be doing in Vero Beach for our members. Big barbecue, going to be doing a little pig roast there. And I know we'll see a lot of you there at that. And that's once again for Insider members only. So just one more reason to join. And then, of course, the discounts. Justin has done an amazing job of getting all kinds of tackle in. But our big goal is not just to have a bunch of tackle. It's to have the best tackle, the stuff that we know works, the stuff that we're spending our own money on. That's why we're the Consumer Reports of saltwater fishing tackle. We've rejected every single sponsor that has come our way because we want to. It's what we wish was around back when we were getting started. We would have saved a whole lot of money not buying whatever talking head or whatever magazine was getting paid to publish XYZ product. So we only sell in our store stuff that we 100% know works, that we're using ourselves, and that we're willing to spend our own hard-earned money on. Of course, if you're a member, you get 20% off, up to 20% off everything in the store. So that's all at saltstrong.com. Please do join us there. We have an unheard of 365-day, 100% money back guarantee. And actually, I think right now it's a 200% money back guarantee, which seems kind of crazy. But that's how confident we are this is going to work for you. You'll save time and save money. So going back to where I started with this, we love to hear your comments, not on YouTube. Obviously, you can comment all you want on YouTube, but if you really want to make sure it gets to us, go to saltstrong.com. At the top, there's a little button, or it could be a little, what do they call it? What do the kids call it? A hamburger menu now, a drop down, where it says fishing tips if you're on mobile. And then you'll see this post where you can put a comment in the blog and it comes to all of us. And we'd love to answer. That's where we're spending the most of our time answering questions. And of course, the community, YouTube, occasionally, depends on how we feel that week. Depends on how many Sea-Doos we've blown up with our torpedoes. And once again, I'm kidding here. So anyone who owns a Sea-Doo or a Yamaha or whatever it is, we like you guys. We just wish you were a little bit more respectful in general. But if you're listening to this still and you own a Sea-Doo or whatever, Wave Runner, chances are good you're probably a pretty good angler and you know how to use it. And we love you. It's just some of these people that come from who knows where. And I don't know what rule book they're reading, but it is not the fisherman's rule book. It is just absolutely crazy. So that's how this whole thing got started. Leave some comments. Join us in the club. Can't wait to see you guys in the community, and we will talk to you on the next episode. Peace. We out. Thanks, guys.
'Cause fishing, it's in my soul.